Traitorous is a scripted soap opera that follows the lives of two well-known, high-status families, the Winstons and the Clarkes. Fueled for decades by a rivalry between the patriarchs, these families have been at odds for decades, but they may have more in common than anyone realizes. With so many secrets and interwoven tales, there is a lot of history to keep track of. That is why, heading into Season 2, we are going to take a minute to reintroduce you to the key members of both families, their core storylines unveiled throughout the first season, and where we left them at the end of Season 1. If you have never seen Traitorous before, the entire first season is available for you to watch to get every detail, but if you just want the information needed to understand Season 2, or you have seen Season 1 and want a refresher on all that went down, this is the video for you. Without further ado, here's what you missed on Traitorous Season 1. Traitorous follows two core families throughout, the Clarke family and the Winston family. The Winston side is led by patriarch Robert Winston, a stoic man that matters a great deal about the family's image, and his soft-spoken wife of 50 years, Juliette. Formerly the CEO of Insurzo Security, Robert has recently retired in his old age, his sister Catalina suddenly turning up after a 50-year absence to help take care of him. Robert has handed off the company to his eldest child, Robert II, kind but stern and juggling far too many roles as he tries to uphold the Winston legacy and tend to his own family. His wife Amy is an ever-busy lawyer, often more wrapped up in work than her family, just like her husband. Their eldest child, Samantha, is the most popular girl at Northridge Academy, following in her parents' footsteps of maintaining a full schedule. Their second oldest child, Chadwick, is still young but already being groomed to take over the business for Robert II one day, while their newest addition, Tyler, largely waddles around. Robert and Juliette's middle child, Brent, has a sordid past, knocking up his high school girlfriend at the age of 16, quickly labeling him as the family disappointment and setting him on the path of addiction and instability that he's never quite gotten out of. His illegitimate daughter, Rosalie, has made a living for herself in her gardening business and prefers to stay out of the Winston affairs when she can. Robert and Juliette's youngest child, Julia, was on track to become a successful social worker, but quickly married domineering husband Terrance right after graduation, getting pregnant soon after. Losing that infant to SIDS 13 years ago has placed a dark cloud over her head to this day, while Terrance maintains that his care is the best for her. The Clarke side is led by the patriarch Justin Clarke, a gruff, quick-tempered man married to an equally shrewd woman named Lorena, who has always stuck by her husband's side. Much like Robert, Justin has also grown old and retired, passing along his own esteemed security company, Securvo, to his middle child. Justin and Rona's eldest child, Justin II, did not find a calling in business, but rather medicine, becoming a renowned doctor and running his own private practice for the past 20 years, though he is currently taking a leave to move back home and take care of his ailing father. Wife Lorena is a kind and generous woman struggling to find her passion now that both of her children are grown. Their oldest child, Christopher, has followed in Justin II's footsteps, recently graduating medical school as well, running the family practice in his father's absence. Christopher has been engaged for 6 years to Amanda, the spoiled daughter of another well-known local family, the Ritters, and eager to finally become Chris's trophy wife. Christopher's younger sister, Charlotte, better known as Charlie, is in college working towards a political science degree, living with her boyfriend Shikoba and her best friend Mohini, providing a voice of reason in the family when needed. Justin and Rona's middle child, and the current CEO of Securvo, is Marissa, a serious woman with a take-charge attitude, intensely focused on success at any cost, constantly vying for the top spot. She seldom pays mind to Shawn, her husband of 14 years, who has held her on a pedestal since college, and their adopted daughter Madison, who despises Marissa in the first place and desperately wishes to learn where she truly comes from. The youngest child of Justin and Rona is Hunter, deviating from his siblings, denouncing the lifestyle of his family, and instead living in a trailer in the woods with his longtime partner Cypress and their pet raccoon, holding much mystery in how exactly he makes a living. Our show began in 1964 as we saw young Justin Clarke and Robert Winston working at the same security firm. Maintaining a friendly rivalry throughout college and into employment, tensions had risen between them as Robert secured a coveted promotion over Justin. Their rivalry boiled into true hatred as Justin received an anonymous tip telling him that Robert got the promotion because he had taken credit for Justin's work on the last job, setting in motion an intense feud that was passed to their bloodlines for decades to come. Though the two men avoid each other at all costs, they have positioned their families and businesses to continue being at odds to this day, and everyone knows that there shall never be peace between the Clarkes and the Winstons. 50 years ago, Catalina eloped with her lover Javier, not sending so much as a postcard in all that time, yet has suddenly reappeared at the Winston Manor to take care of her older brother Robert in his old age. It is clear from the start that the mysterious woman has some tension with Robert's wife Juliette. Typically soft-spoken, bordering on sheepish, Juliette never raises her voice, yet for some reason she is frequently bickering with her sister-in-law, Catalina typically picking at Juliette's reluctance to speak for herself, while Juliette remains frustrated at Catalina's meddling in her home life. One night, Robert II finds his mother and aunt in a heated argument about Robert's state, questioning the two on what their disagreement about telling Robert the truth means, both remaining tight-lipped. When Catalina offers her private booze stash to Robert II to lighten his load, she reveals that she did not intend to ditch the family, rather Juliette was the one who prohibited her contact all this time. On the eve of Juliette and Robert's wedding, Catalina prodded Juliette about giving up her dream to attend college for marriage, Juliette agreeing but vowing to do everything to raise a safe family, which meant keeping Catalina and her shady past far, far away. Irate with his mother for lying his whole life, Robert II does not end up getting her side of the story until the Ritter Gala, where Juliette reveals that she was the one who actually ran all of the numbers for Insurzo during Robert's reign, confirming what Catalina told him about Juliette once being known as a mathematical genius, but refuting Catalina's claims on why she asked the woman to leave for good, stating that rather than petty crime like Catalina claimed, it's because Catalina is the reason the Clarke and Winston family feud began in the first place. Though it has been 13 years since the sudden death of her daughter Annabelle, Julia Winston is still largely catatonic, constantly grieving this loss, her days spent in the old nursery or out by the grave. Robert II is always checking in on his little sister, making sure she has eaten and often fighting with her husband Terrance, who frequently pushes the family away from Julia, insisting that she is fine and that he knows best. Terrance is frustrated by how annoying and depressed Julia is these days, and we see that Terrance's frustration is actually what started all of this, and that Annabelle did not actually die of SIDS. It was Terrance who went on the dark web and found a hitman to take care of the screaming infant. Since Terrance connected himself to the Winstons for the money, a child is in much deeper than he planned, so he lies to Julia the next morning that the baby passed away in the night. The night of prom, Robert II looks through the security tapes for the house, trying to find evidence that his wife may be cheating, yet instead he finds a clip of Terrance laughing maniacally by Annabelle's grave, increasing his suspicion of the man. When pressing Julia for details on Annabelle's death the next day, he only serves to upset her. When Robert II's anger boils over at dinner, Terrance uses this as an opportunity to speak with Robert about how unstable his son is and that the Winston inheritance would be better off in the hands of someone who could handle that responsibility, and Robert agrees to switch the inheritance to Terrance in his will. Unable to shake his hunch about Terrance, that night a drunken Robert II frantically digs up Annabelle's grave, Julia rushing over screaming protests, drawing the attention of Terrance as well as Robert II reaches the casket, Julia feeling anger fill her bones for the first time in over a decade when she sees that the casket is empty. For the first time, Julia believes her brother over her husband, her and Terrance screaming at one another, Terrance dropping the act, stating that he finally has the inheritance so it doesn't matter anymore, Julia breaking down as Terrance walks off, seemingly for good, since Julia shows up to the Ritter Charity Gala alone. Robert II is struggling to keep Insurzo afloat without tossing his family and his marriage to the side, but he would rather break down at night than admit that to anyone, least of all his father, who is counting on him to do the Winston name proud. It is difficult to spend time with his wife Amy, as she is a busy lawyer, even more preoccupied these days as she has taken on a top-secret clientele that she is not allowed to release any details on, but requires much attention. Taking care of his youngest sister Julia also proves quite the task, as her husband Terrance often brushes him away, Robert II feeling like he's the only one in the household that thinks there's something off about Terrance and the way he treats Julia. Robert II quickly starts to feel like it is not just Terrance who is keeping information from him, as Aunt Catalina won't clarify who this Tony is that she's been speaking with, or what the issue is between her and Juliette. On top of that, he begins to suspect there's more to Amy's big client than she says after overhearing a suspiciously flirty phone conversation. When looking into Amy potentially cheating, he finds a suspicious clip of Terrance instead, taking the information to his father, who tells him off for snooping instead. Ironically enough, Robert and grandson Chadwick go to the Clarke estate to play a prank, but instead see Amy headed over, seeming quite friendly with Hunter Clarke on the stoop, information he is all too happy to pass along to his son. Robert II doesn't want to read into anything his father said, but cannot help the paranoia over Amy. While out shopping with Samantha, Aimi tries to use the family credit card, but it is declined, Robert II snapping at her when she tries to question him. At a family dinner orchestrated by Catalina, Robert makes one too many cutting comments towards his son about potentially running Insurzo into the ground, and Robert II snaps, spouting off about his mother's lies, his wife's cheating, the family's absurd obsession with Terrance, and his struggle to keep them and the company intact all on his own. Aimi is hurt and confused by the cheating comment, but Robert II storms off to drink, ending the night by digging up Annabelle's grave and at least confirming he's not crazy on the Terrance front. When the Ritter charity gala comes around, Aimi tries to speak to a bitter Robert II, who had made himself scarce since the last dinner, but the two get nowhere while Robert II is drunk at the bar. Aimi spends most of the night by herself, but Hunter comes to speak with her, Aimi rolling her eyes at his idle flirts, saying it's best if they're not seen together, but asking him for more documentation for their case because it is hard to build something substantial off of the vague details he's provided so far. Robert needles at his son yet again, Robert II drunk and uncaring, exclaiming that his father is right about him failing the business, that most of their money is gone, storming away from prying eyes. However, he's pulled back to the courtyard as all of the Insurzo clients in attendance discover their accounts have been drained, Robert II's stomach dropping, and a shocked Aimi looking over at Hunter who will not meet her gaze, Amy's face falling into a disappointed realization. Single yet content with her lot, Rosalie Winston has realized the only thing missing in her life is a child and sets out to find a sperm donor. After deciding the best match, she receives a text that this specific donor would like to meet up, and though she finds it an unusual request, she agrees. At the meeting, she discovers the donor is in fact Christopher Clarke, who explains that he sold his sperm on a whim years ago to snag some concert tickets to woo Amanda at the start of their dating. Though Christopher is largely at odds with Amanda, her often bossing him around, since the beginning he has done whatever needed to make her happy, even selling his sperm for some quick cash, as the marriage of the Clarke and Ritter families is what his grandfather wanted, just like how becoming a doctor is what his father wanted. Christopher, for whatever reason, feels compelled to help Rosalie, though, agreeing to release his sample, though they both vow that no one can ever know this child will be made of both Winston and Clarke DNA. Telling her to text him if she ever needs anything, he's the one who ends up texting her again first the next morning, bored at work and remembering how well they got along. The two begin texting frequently, Christopher feeling lighter than he has felt in a long time, as Amanda grows frustrated with his newfound distance from her. Amanda asks the other Clarke family members how to win Chris's attention back, Charlie suggesting she be nicer, Amanda deciding to help plan her family's annual charity ball to show how kind she is, yet Christopher still seems distracted these days. After a day of no response from Rosie, Chris ends up visiting her to find out that she did not get pregnant. Feeling her sorrow, he generously agrees to provide another sample for her to try again, and a bit later, she finds that the second attempt has worked, Christopher pulling her into a kiss, swept up in the joy and excitement of that news. The two awkwardly part, ceasing contact for a while as Chris is suddenly all over Amanda again. Yet after Amanda and Christopher attend a dinner with prospective caterers, they get into their most heated argument yet, Amanda berating his embarrassing behavior as Christopher finally lashes out at her for her offensive comments. He angrily storms off into the night, his feet making their way to Rosalie's home without notice. Pulling him in from the storm, the two have their first conversation since the kiss, Christopher denouncing Amanda and falling into Rosalie's bed for the night instead. In the morning, Rosalie discusses her plans to move further away and into a larger home to prepare for this baby, offering Christopher a spot with her if he wants to escape what the Clarkes desire and make a life for himself with her. Christopher says he will think about it as the two become entangled once more before Chris must leave to prepare for the Ritter charity ball. Having struggled with addiction most of his life, Brent has fallen off the wagon once more, shacking up in the Winston Manor's garage, having a hard time pushing past the drugs and depression to find a job and a way back on his feet, even though his father berates him incessantly about it. Even on the way to apply for jobs, he stops to score some weed from his dealer Cypress, the girlfriend of Hunter Clarke. Brent realizes how far gone he is after Cypress mentions his daughter Rosalie being glad he is looking for jobs, not remembering when he would have told his dealer those personal details, finding himself flustered as Hunter casually flirts with him upon leaving. Things get even more awkward as Brent strikes out with jobs, but is asked out on a date by Jacob Henderson after interviewing at his bank. He mentions that he isn't gay but makes the rash decision to accept the date after his father's homophobic ramblings, a decision Jacob doesn't quite understand but is amused by as the date rolls around. While Brent and Jacob are out on their not date, Brent ends up running into Rosalie, who is also out to dinner with her mother, Aaliyah, and stepfather, Antonio. Aaliyah mentions Rosalie's pregnancy, a wake-up call that Brent needs to get his life in order to stop missing details and be a good grandfather for this kid. Jacob offers to be his sponsor, having struggled with addiction in the past himself, but Brent needs some time to evaluate what he wants. At the Ritter Charity Gala, after being reminded by Cypress and Rosalie that the two are half-siblings, Cypress being the child his ex-girlfriend had with her current husband, Brent is ashamed of not remembering his daughter and his dealer were sisters, the final push needed to take Jacob up on his offer. Madison loves her adopted father, Shawn, but has never found a connection with her mother, Marissa, the woman often seeming more annoyed with her than loving. She begs her father to look into her birth parents yet again, eager to know where she comes from, but Shawn reiterates that her mother is the new CEO of Securvo and has a lot of eyes on her, so she doesn't want the bad press that would come from her own child desperately trying to find her birth mom. Madison fruitlessly attempts to bring up the issue with her mom once more, Marissa chewing her out, and Maddie deciding to take matters into her own hands. She researches how to find DNA results, asking cousin and confidant Charlie if she can sign off on the process and have the results sent to her apartment instead to keep them away from Marissa's eye, and Charlie happily agrees to help. When the results come, Charlie hides them in Madison's room for when she is ready, and eventually, Madison opens the results to discover the shocking information that Julia Winston is in fact her biological mother. Dumbfounded, Madison quietly watches Julia for most of the Ritter Charity Gala, grabbing Julia's napkin when she drops it, if only to have a brief conversation with the woman, but not having the courage to bring up the news. Marissa thinks she has been handling Securvo just fine ever since she took over as CEO, but her father Justin is constantly meddling in the records and questioning her choices. Marissa promises him, though, that everything is handled and the numbers will be improving soon. Hunter rarely spends time at the Clarke estate, but has been stopping by more often lately as Marissa has been requesting his presence. Marissa typically quite irate as she pulls her brother off to have conversations away from the rest of the family every time. Even though Hunter is usually reluctant to speak with his sister, he knows he must do her bidding, for the two hold a dark secret between them. 13 years ago, Hunter, who was just a teenager at the time, was messing around in the dark web message boards, taking on criminal yet petty tasks. He got in over his head, though, after taking what he thought was a babysitting job, but ended up being Terrance Winston requesting the murder of his infant daughter. Left in the forest with a sleeping Annabelle Winston, Hunter knew he couldn't kill the child, so he panicked and took her to Marissa, who chewed him out for his stupidity, but agreeing to take care of the situation, claiming to have pulled some strings to fast-track the adoption process, henceforth raising Annabelle as her own daughter named Madison instead. So focused on the business, Marissa's husband Shawn is pushed to the side, being brushed off at any time he tries to take the opportunity to speak with her and learn more about what is going on in her life, even offering to help her with the workload. Though she always dismisses Shawn, he never ceases his prying, trying to get anything out of Hunter and the other family members as well, even going so far as to sit down at her laptop himself when she exits the room. Justin begins to lay off of his daughter a bit as Securvo's numbers begin to improve, Marissa happy with how things have gone, though questioning Hunter's apparent familiarity with Amy Winston when she stopped by to speak with Rona. As the Ritter Charity Gala is coming to a close, Hunter sheepishly re-enters the courtyard, Marissa nowhere to be seen as all of the Insurzo clients in attendance receive alerts that their accounts have been drained. Justin II is currently sleeping in the study of his family home, moved back in to take care of Justin I, but his father remaining reluctant to receive medical help from his son, insisting he's totally fine. Justin II's wife, Lorena, spends her days trying out different hobbies to find her new passion now that Charlie and Christopher are both grown up, but Justin II's busy schedule leaves little time for the married couple to connect. After arriving home early one day, Lorena discovers that Justin II is not actually preoccupied with work things, but the red-headed nurse from his practice, Kassandra, an affair from years ago that Lorena trusted Justin II to have cut off in 2002, but has clearly continued. Justin II explains that he only realized he still felt something for Kassandra when she returned a couple of years ago, trying to blame the affair on Lorena for being busy with hobbies, but she isn't having it, going to stay with Charlie for a few days to sort out her thoughts. He loses favor with Kassandra as well, who was only sleeping with Justin II because she thought he had broken up with Lorena. She also mentions to him that she only returned because she needed financial help taking care of the 2 children he left her pregnant with 18 years ago. Kassandra ends up calling Lorena, asking to speak with her, Lorena reluctantly agreeing, and the 2 women meeting up to compare notes and realize that Justin II had screwed them both over. Soon after, Lorena decides to officially ask Justin II for a divorce, Justin distraught, but the 2 agreeing to not take the separation public yet. Christopher ends up walking in on Lorena making out with Kassandra, Lorena telling him of her separation with his father and Justin II's cheating, explaining that after her and Kassandra met up to talk about the situation, they felt drawn to each other and have fallen into a bit of a relationship themselves. Lorena tells Charlie as well, both children knowing of the situation by the Ritter charity ball, where Justin II continues to push Lorena's boundaries of playing nice in public, making her uncomfortable enough to physically push him away, drawing attention from most everyone else there as she shouts that she is in love with another woman. Charlie no longer lives in the family household, but will often visit to see her mom and brother or do laundry. Frequently, she brings along her longtime boyfriend Shikoba and their roommate and best friend Mohini. Quite close to her brother, Charlie realizes early on that he is keeping something from her, but Christopher refuses to open up. Christopher finds something else to hide from Charlie, though, when he walks in on Shikoba and Mohini making out in the laundry room while Charlie is absent, but they insist that everything is okay and that they can explain. After separating from Justin II, Lorena stays with her daughter for a bit, sensing some awkwardness from Mohini about her living there, asking Charlie if Mohini knows that Lorena is aware that she's trans, Charlie laughing that off, saying of course she knows, and assuring her that that is not the reason that Mohini's been a bit awkward, but not to worry. Eventually, when Lorena reveals to Charlie that she has started a relationship with Kassandra, Charlie reveals that Mohini is not just her best friend, but her girlfriend, Charlie, Shikoba, and Mohini all being in a polyamorous triad. But she tends to keep that information on the down low around the family to not deal with high society's judgment. At the Ritter charity gala, after Lorena exclaims that she is in love with a woman, Charlie blurts out her poly secret as well to take some of the heat off of her mother at the event and show some solidarity. Samantha is the perfect student, perfect daughter, and perfect girlfriend, securing accolades in all areas, but plotting to receive the most coveted honor of all, the title of prom queen, her boyfriend Maxwell as king, of course. Samantha's catty friends make her uncomfortable, not only with their bullying, but their discussion of putting out on prom night, but Maxwell assures her that there is no pressure to lose their virginities at prom. He just wants to spend all night with her and has no expectations. Once prom rolls around, Maxwell abruptly changes their meeting plans and urges her to turn off her phone so that they can spend the night focused on one another. At the dance, Maxwell wins prom king, but Samantha's plans are shattered as prom queen goes to her friend Beverly instead, storming out as her boyfriend dances with another girl. Max follows her, asking her to a hotel to cheer her up, trying to throw the moves on when they arrive, sending Samantha into a panic. As she takes a moment to collect herself, she turns on her phone to see that she has a ton of missed texts from Maxwell, saddened that she attended prom without him. We discover that Maxwell has a twin brother named Dylan, who was just released from juvie, finding out that not only are Maxwell and Dylan the bastard children of Justin II and his mistress Kassandra, but that Clarke put Dylan up to the task of ruining Samantha's prom in a diabolical plot to get one over on the Winstons. Though Maxwell attacks his brother for harassing his girlfriend, Samantha removes herself from the situation, taking a break from Maxwell altogether to process everything, her mother Aimi tearing Rona a new one after hearing what has happened. After an explosive family dinner and her so-called friends turning their vitriol towards her after the disaster of a prom, Samantha realizes just how much she misses having Maxwell as a friend to confide in, resuming contact with him, the two eventually testing the waters of dating again as they attend the Ritter charity gala together. At the end of Season 1, the annual Ritter charity gala put on by Amanda's family set the stage for all of our cast to converge for a dramatic conclusion. Chris and Amanda put on a happy face while Rosalie was left wondering whether Christopher would take her up on the offer to run away together. Catalina was frequently popping into the kitchen to say hi to Antonio, Cypress's father that she suggested to Amanda for catering, and the son of Catalina that she seldom mentions, along with his wife Aaliyah, the mother of Rosalie, and Cypress both. Outside in the courtyard, Catalina would catch up with Clarke, vaguely confirming that everything is going according to plan. After accepting Jacob's sponsorship offer, Brent was joined by Marissa, idly speaking about different families in attendance, Brent muttering something about those being names he recognized on a screen, a comment that does not escape Marissa. He is seen being dragged to an upper floor by Marissa later as the event heads into the dinner portion, both Lorena and Robert II making scenes of their own. Hearing that Marissa had pulled Brent aside, Hunter panics and exits the courtyard, Robert II also having stumbled away to speak with his mother. The night reached a fever pitch as all of the Insurzo clients at the event received a notice that their accounts were drained, Robert aiming his anger at Justin, the two old rivals screaming at each other in a spectacle for the ages that ended in both patriarchs choking on their words and keeling over at the exact same time. A week after the deaths of Robert Winston and Justin Clarke, we see that Amanda finds an apology note from Christopher, noticing his car is gone from the driveway as she tosses a positive pregnancy test to the side. Madison heads to the Winston Manor to show Julia her adoption papers, the woman passing out as she sees her child alive for the first time in 13 years. At the very end, we traveled back to the beginning, the day that Justin received an anonymous tip about Robert swiping his promotion, the day that the Winston and Clarke feud was set in stone, as the figure that drops the anonymous tip on the doorstep turns around and turns out to be Catalina Winston. Robert Winston and Justin Clarke are both dead, but much mystery remains around their demise. Juliette has just revealed to Robert II that she used to run the numbers for Insurzo and that Catalina is the one to kick off the feud between Justin and Robert. Catalina and Rona both seem pretty smug about the gala, clearly plotting something together all night. Robert II has lost full control of the company. Aimi worries she has lost her husband and is concerned about the future of whatever case she's putting together with Hunter Clarke, now concerned the Winstons have been the target of his work. Samantha is getting her confidence back and figuring out where she wants things to go with Maxwell. Chadwick and Tyler are growing up still. Brent has decided to actually get clean this time, choosing Jacob Henderson as his sponsor. Julia is processing the knowledge that her child is alive and has been known as Madison Clarke. Terrance is nowhere to be seen. Rosalie is pregnant with Christopher's child and off to a new home. Justin II is a divorcee, publicly embarrassed by his wife. Lorena has embarrassed herself by publicly exclaiming that she's in love with a woman her husband was cheating on her with, that she's only been fooling around with for a couple of weeks. Amanda is also pregnant with Christopher's child, irate to be left with only an apology note. Christopher was left with the decision of staying with Amanda or moving away with Rosalie, only his empty parking spot at the Clarke estate left to be seen. Charlie has publicly admitted that she's in a polyamorous triad with her boyfriend Shikoba and best friend, or rather girlfriend, Mohini, no longer having to hide that part of her life. Marissa was last seen angrily dragging Brent away, but her company being given the gift of certain death for Insurzo with the massive breach. Shawn remains eager for information and affection from a wife that pays him no mind. Madison has just told Julia Winston that she is her daughter, and Hunter was last seen looking guilty as the Insurzo clients lost all of their money. Will Insurzo recover? What is left of Robert II and Amy's marriage? What choice did Chris make? And what exactly happened to Robert Winston and Justin Clarke for them to perish in unison? Much has been revealed, but plenty of secrets still remain, and plenty of stories have not found their endings. Hopefully this overview of the Clarkes and the Winstons, along with everything they got up to in Season 1, provided you with all of the info you need heading into Season 2. And hopefully you are excited to see where all of this leads when Traitorous returns.